Welcome back to Stranded in Pittsburgh. You have to have a little more energy in the intro this time because it was a depressing week to be a Pittsburgh sports fan, sports follower, sports journalist, whatever words you want to use. It was a rough one to get through, and we'll dive into all of that in case you live under a rock in just a few moments. So bad, in fact, Ethan didn't even show up yet again, but we've beaten that joke to death. He didn't text me last week, the code word. He didn't text me our records for predicting the Steelers. To say he's in the doghouse with me, well, that would be a bit of an understatement. But you know who's not in the doghouse with me? That would be the man to my left, I think. Right? I don't know. I don't know how you incorporate the reversed camera, but it's okay. Nate Breisinger's here. Nate, how are we going to get through this week? No, Ethan. Depressing topics. It's going to have to be a true professionalism display here.
It's going to be tough because we've seen a lot of bad Pittsburgh sports weekends, over our lifetime, but I don't know if it gets much worse than this with some of the performances we've seen from the teams that are currently playing. And of course, it just happens to correlate right with Halloween time. So, I mean, man, it was a damn scary weekend for Pittsburgh sports.
Yeah, usually Nate's favorite time of the year, Halloween. He told me how excited he was to dress up as Lightning McQueen this year, and it turned out he didn't even go out because he's just too sad from what happened. But I did see some pictures circulating of Ethan. Ethan went out. Nate, would you like to tell everyone his costume, or do you want me to have the honor?
Go ahead. You have the honor.
Bob the Builder, which I've never seen Ethan pick up a tool in his life. So Bob the Builder, Ethan, I don't know how I feel about that one. Maybe he can fix this show one day if he ever comes back, but I'm not too optimistic about that one. But anyway, we'll begin with a game that I felt a lot more optimistic about 5 or 6 days ago. That's Steelers-Titans, Thursday Night Football on Twitch or Amazon Prime, whichever you prefer. Thought this was going to be a fun game. Steelers, I think, play Green Bay after this one. That's two pretty winnable games for them, I like to think. And then Will Levis was announced as the starter for the Titans, who were wearing the Oilers jerseys last weekend. Don't even get me started on that. I just wanted to throw that in there and say that's completely wrong. But Will Levis, I don't know if it's the mayonnaise in the coffee or what, but he balled out last week. He resurrected DeAndre Hopkins' career, and the Titans look like a force to be reckoned with in that game. And now I'm a little more nervous about this game than I was to begin with. Kenny Pickett allegedly going to play despite his rib injury. Nate, what are our reactions maybe to that Jacksonville game? And then we'll dive into the Titans matchup here.
I mean, obviously it was tough to see Pickett go down and Mitch Trubisky get thrown into the fire, especially with the way the offense has been playing. I mean, with that, change of guard in the middle of a game, it's not going to help in general with the way that offense has been rolling. But Trubisky throws the lone touchdown to George Pickens, who only had one reception. Need to get him more incorporated in the offense. But I think there were some missed opportunities when Kenny Pickett was in there. We saw Deontay drops, and I mean, I was almost going to say that right away, but dropped the opening play. I mean, right up the middle, off his fingertips, and as your number one wide receiver, he has to make that catch. I mean, it sets the tone offensively. Pickett put it right where it needs to be, maybe a little high, but I mean, as your number one wide receiver, you got to come down with that. And he had some room. Obviously, two defenders converging on him, but that's a drop that he needs to make. And then there was, I think, a missed opportunity. Their one red zone appearance, Johnson slips on a little in route because Pickett threw behind him. And I blame that one on Kenny Pickett. So I think a couple missed opportunities offensively early in the game hurts them in the end. And Jacksonville, I mean, they look pretty solid. I mean, we knew that going into that game, Trevor Lawrence was going to be good. Their passing game is pretty strong. ETN found the end zone once again. But Jacksonville was able to hold, the Steelers offense at bay, which is, I mean, pretty easy at this point of the season. But I think there was, it's tough for Trubisky to get in there, but he makes it, he throws a touchdown. But then after that, I mean, we saw the Trubisky we know and love. So yeah, a tough one for the Steelers, and knew that was going to be the case going in.
Yeah, just a very frustrating watch. I've liked how much they've gotten Deontay involved after coming back from his injury. But as you mentioned, he got paid like the WR1 he thinks he is, and he has to make those plays, especially at the beginning of the game where there's an opportunity right there. You have some momentum from the previous week. You can't pass up on an opportunity to capitalize like that. And then this was just a game of the wind being knocked out of your sails. I mean, that whole last minute and a half of the second quarter, it was just debilitating. And I think, some people were making fun of Deontay Johnson for being so critical of the refs and saying how they cost them the game. But that's a complete momentum shift for Pittsburgh. It seemed like things were turning for the better. And then you slow the game way down, reviewing everything. I don't think some of it needed to be reviewed, and Pittsburgh just gets a field goal negated, and just so much went against them in that last minute and a half. And it's a complete momentum shift. And we've seen Pittsburgh, I don't want to go as far as calling them a second half team, but we've seen them kind of step it up a bit more in the second half. Maybe not a juggernaut, but they play a lot more coherent football in the second half. And it just felt like after that sequence, everything just kind of slowed down. And that, again, is in part because Kenny Pickett, took a RKO, and there was no flag, there was no nothing, which is even more, rich when you see what they called on the Trevor Lawrence penalty earlier in the half. And, I'm a big it's football kind of guy. Some of those roughing the passers you can't ignore. But I mean, this one you can't ignore, I should say. You should be ignoring some of those, because if you're a 300-pound guy running full speed at another man, you're going to hurt yourself if you try to stop all your momentum on a dime. But I mean, on this particular play, he watches the ball come out of his hand. Granted, he couldn't stop here, but he then proceeds to grab and drive Pickett into the ground. There were about 5 other ways I like to think he could have gotten out of doing it the way he did without exerting as much force onto Pickett. And unfortunately, Kenny's not very good, at least yet, and he hasn't been in the league very long. So Kenny's not going to get those calls. But I think that one's pretty inexcusable to not throw a flag on, especially considering the standard they said earlier. And then not to continue rambling on things you kind of already touched on. But Money Mitch goes in there, finds Pickens. You go, do we want to rush Kenny back necessarily? And then Allen Robinson's lone target of the game, Mitch goes, oh my, 3 defenders right by him. Let me cook. And he zips this ball. It looked like it was sped up. He threw it so hard. I thought they put the game on ×5 speed or something. He yeehaws that ball and it gets picked off. That's Allen Robinson's only target of the game, like I just said. And from that, I barely paid much attention. I know that's probably not something I should admit on this show, but you knew how the game was going to end after that. And unfortunately, things didn't get much better. But it's a new week, perhaps the worst time of the year to have a short week if you're the Steelers. But Cam Hayward's back at least. Maybe that's some sort of positive to negate the fact that, excuse me, that Fitzpatrick's out. And I thought I was going to sneeze, so I covered it up with a cough rather than to make it look like I just had a lapse in judgment there. But, Fitzpatrick's out. Cam Hayward comes back. I don't know, man. I really don't know what I'm feeling going into this week, Nate.
Yeah, this one's a tough one. Short week against a Titans team that's coming off of, a momentum building win for them against the Falcons. You see Will Levis for the first time, and he looked good. He looks everything that the Steelers want Kenny Pickett to be. He went in there, was not afraid to be in the pocket, threw a couple deep balls, found DeAndre Hopkins a couple times. So just I think the momentum, the confidence that the Titans quickly built to put themselves at 3-4, it's a below 500 team, which the Steelers, I mean, you look on paper, should beat with, a young quarterback, under center for them. But the other part of it is Derrick Henry's there. I mean, Derrick Henry with a 100-yard rushing game last week against the Falcons. And, I mean, Steelers have struggled to stop the run for the most part of the season. So I think Cam Hayward's a nice boost in the interior of that D line. But this is a tough one. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I still think we haven't seen what we needed to see from the Steelers offense last week. Pickett gets hurt, Pickett's back. It's another toss-up game against, another one of these AFC South teams.
Yeah, I think it's fair to call a lot of Steeler games toss-up games this year. Obviously, the game against the Texans didn't go too well. The game against Jacksonville didn't go too well, so maybe they can get in the win column. And you'd think against a rookie quarterback, you'd feel pretty good about it. But like you said, Nate, there's just that weird feeling right now. I'm not sure what I see happening here. Part of me likes to go, okay, Levis had his little My first game conveniently went really well, but I'm going to get brought back down to earth kind of moment here. But I'm not sure how much I believe in that, especially with the Steelers secondary, without Minka Fitzpatrick. But I'm going to believe in the Steelers. I'll believe in Mike Tomlin on Thursday night with Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit watching. I think he's going to go in there, and I think he's going to have this team ready to win. And I think Pittsburgh's going to get it done, and it'll be a true Thursday night football ugly ass game. I'm going 20-16. Throw it back to one of the best years of my life, 2016. Not as good as 2023, but 2016's up there. Definitely in the top 5. Pittsburgh's going to walk out with a win, and you're going to want to have a garbage can nearby because you're going to throw up. If you thought the Giants and Jets game was really bad, that was probably one of the worst games I've ever seen. This game might be that much better, in my opinion. I think it's going to be sloppy, a big old sloppy jalopy.
I agree, especially for the Steelers. I think, this offense, we haven't seen the consistency that we wanted to. Pickett's going to be potentially nursing that injury that we saw from last week. I think the Titans come in and win 24-17, and I think it's behind a strong Derrick Henry run game. I say 2 touchdowns from him on the ground. So it's going to be tough for the Steelers, and I think, back-to-back losses is going to really set them back this year.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I can see you being completely right. But I don't think we will disagree on what the Pitt Panthers are going to be doing this weekend when they host the Florida State Seminoles, one of the best teams in the entire country, after what happened to in their Notre Dame matchup last week. And it's what happened after that blowout loss that everyone's been talking about all week, thanks to some quotes that went out from Narduzzi himself. I'll read part of one right now. This is verbatim. I'll go back as a football coach. Sorry, I forgot how to read. I'll go back, comma. As a football coach, you lose a lot of good players from a year ago, and you think as a coach you're going to replace them, and obviously we haven't. Again, it starts with me. I didn't do a good enough job coaching today. Put it on me, and we've got to make plays. Now, there was a whole thing on Twitter saying that, a lot of this wasn't the full story, blah, 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 blah. I think regardless, I don't know if that was the full quote or not, and that's on me, but whatever happened when the full quote was made available, I didn't think it made Pat Narduzzi look much better. Regardless of how many times you say that's on me, I'm zeroing in on the phrase, you lose a lot of good players from a year ago, and you think you're going to replace them, and we haven't. I don't care what's said before or after that. That's pretty tough to come back from.
Yeah, and especially in the day and age of college football now in 2023, as a head coach, you say that, and you're going to start to see a lot of players packing their bags and hit the portal because, how open it is and how easy it is for players to leave. We actually saw, similar case with Colorado. I don't know if you saw the Deion Sanders quote about his offensive lineman not protecting his son. So I'm sure there's players up there not too happy. But, after a loss, probably I think it's his marks as his worst loss in his tenure in terms of point differential, beating out the 51-6 loss to Penn State back, years back at Heinz Field. But, this is a tough loss to begin with. Pitt didn't play well at all in any phase of the game. And then your head coach, who prides himself on relationships with his team, goes and says, yeah, we haven't replaced those guys from last year at all. If you want to say, okay, we haven't developed the way we wanted to, or we just haven't grown as a team the way I thought we could have, compared to where we were last year, okay, reword it. But Narduzzi does that a lot, where he puts out a comment and he really has to save himself, and go back and retract those statements. And he made a big comment here, I think, and it didn't sit well with the players. They took immediately to Twitter, quote tweeting the main tweet that went out after the game. It's just not a good look. Hopefully, Pitt, hopefully he doesn't lose the locker room, which, they've had a couple bad seasons under Narduzzi. 2017, they went 5-7, and he didn't really lose the locker room. But, this is getting bad. you lose to Wake Forest 2 weeks ago, which is a game they could have won. They lose in heartbreaking fashion at the end of the game. And I think the team, was probably, looking at that Veyer slide, we probably grew around him and said, okay, we're going to move passes. But after you get annihilated by a rival 58-7, and it's the 14th team in the country, but you beat a 14th ranked team earlier this year. And I said this last week on the podcast. I mean, Pitt just does not match up well with Notre Dame. I mean, every time. But just at the end of the game, to go and make that comment, I mean, that's tough. I mean, as a player, that's probably really hard to hear after you just got slapped in South Bend.
Yeah, it's been a wild month or so for Pitt football. You have the Louisville win. You have the Wake Forest immediately after that game, I think.
I believe so, yeah.
You have that heartbreaking loss to Wake Forest, and then you have this. There's been a lot of off the field things. We've heard all about the blue vase. We heard all about the Jerkovic. Is he a tight end, or what's going on with the quarterback situation? We've heard all these things on field, off field, and then in the middle of all that, you get, destroyed by Notre Dame, and you have the chance still to finish this season strong, to take a positive away from it with your young quarterback and some of your other key players. In a loss like this, sure, it sucks, but it's going to happen once in a while. That's just the aspect of the college game. A program like Pitt, who can usually put up a respectable performance against I don't want to call Notre Dame a juggernaut. Being a Notre Dame fan, I don't want to call them a juggernaut. They've lost too many big games for me to do that. So bad Brent Musburger was, salivating over AJ McCarron's wife in that national championship game. But I digress. A big power, not even Power 5, that's incorrect. A big school like Notre Dame, there we go, who's always ranked high. A loss like that's going to happen. And then, playing Florida State, I'm sure you're already a little worried, but there's still chances for there to be big positives from this season, even from these games. I mean, who would have thought they were going to beat Louisville when that game came around? Not I. There's still a lot that can be taken away from this season that's considered good. And to make just such a mindless, self-inflicted wound like this as the head coach, it just truly baffles me. And like you said, if he says we haven't developed or whatever terminology you want to use there to make it sound better, and maybe that's what ultimately he was getting at, but to say it the way he said it is just insane to me. And that's what I was getting at the beginning. There's really nothing he could have said before or after that one comment about we didn't replace them well, where there's really no defending it. There's no way to say, well, this isn't what he meant. You're saying that these guys are not as good as the guys you lost. And when you graduate or have as many good players as they did move on, that's kind of expected. It's something no one's going to say, but you can tell. But you don't flat out say it like that. And for someone like Narduzzi, who's been there for as long as he has, you think he would know better, especially the way Pittsburgh media likes to run with things like this. I mean, again, you saw the blue vase thing, how quickly that picked up. You can't be slipping like that if you're Pat Narduzzi. And unfortunately, he fell pretty hard.
Yeah, and I mean, it just takes me back to the point of like those players are reading the comments. I mean, probably boarding the plane or on the bus leaving the stadium, and Narduzzi's sitting right there. I mean, that's tough. I mean, to read that as a player, and yeah, like you said, I mean, they in the past 3-4 seasons they have the most draft picks out of any ACC team, so they're gonna have a setback. I mean, they are. I mean, 2 back-to-back 10 or top 25 ranked seasons, 20 wins over their last 2 years. They're gonna have a setback. It's just gonna happen. You have a young team. You have a rather young team. I mean, not many players are of high at a high standard are moving on after this year. Losing my train of thought here, but either way, I mean,
I've done that a few times too, so don't worry.
This is rather a young team, so I mean, to go and say that, I mean, that's gotta take a lot of confidence away from those players. That, I mean, obviously you're walking out of a game where you get pushed around and bullied, but I mean, whatever confidence was left, I mean, that's pretty much out the window. So it's tough. I mean, Narduzzi just can't make those comments, and now you go and play a college football playoff team right now coming into Acrisure Stadium this weekend. So, I mean, that's going to be an even bigger test.
Yeah, weird time to make those comments. Not like I said, it's never a good time to say something that directly, but between your 2 toughest games of the year, basically, they're not playing Montana next week. They're playing this week, they're playing Florida State. So, not a good time. I'm afraid to know what the line is, and I'm afraid to know how far off they are from covering it, because I don't think it's going to be pretty.
The line's sitting at 21.5. favoring Florida
They
State.
only gave Notre Dame 20.5, so that's very
Yeah,
surprising.
yeah. Well, I mean, again, I think it's the whole matchup thing. I think Pitt really has a bad record against Notre Dame, and maybe that's why they favored them so heavily. Um, but Pitt's also at home this week, and the last time a college football playoff team, one of the top four teams, walked into Acrisure or Heinz Stadium at the time was number 2 Miami in 2017, a year where Pitt finished below 500 and Pitt beat them.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows what can happen? I mean, with the team reeling the way it is at 2-6, they're just looking for anything, and they're going to probably put up a strong fight. My predictions: Florida State 40, Pitt 17. Still pretty lopsided, but I think you'll see a little bit of a better offensive performance compared to Notre Dame. But I mean, Frank Signetti, I mean, he's struggled, I think, with this offense just as much as Matt Canada has with the Steelers. Now there's a lot of blame that could be shared elsewhere, but um, I think Florida State's going to win this one pretty big. So
At 52-16, Florida State beating Pitt. And I'd like to say we're going to something more promising, but we're not, because we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Penguins, who sit at 3-6 right now in the eighth in the Metropolitan Division. They're about to go on that big West Coast swing we alluded to last week. But the good news is they start against the Sharks, who haven't won a game yet. And Nate, as you mentioned, they've done fairly well for themselves on these West Coast trips in the past. How do you feel coming off of that very frustrating loss to the Ducks?
yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly. I mean, it's definitely frustrating because the Penguins, I mean, they know they have the star power to win. But again, we mentioned it last episode, just the age of this team. They're the oldest team. I thought it was funny. At the beginning of the Pittsburgh Sportsnet broadcast for the was it the Ducks game? Yeah, it was the Ducks game. Haley Hunter, I believe that's her name, the new ringside reporter for the Pens, talked about how even though they're the oldest team, they still have a top 10 speed burst of any team in the NHL. And I'm just like thinking, I'm like, oh, what an interesting fact to bring up. Hasn't helped them this year being a fast team, even though they're old. I mean, 3-6, they're the worst in the East, not just the worst in the Metro. I mean, the worst in the East. And I mean, we haven't said that probably in a long time. But I mean, that was a game at least against Anaheim where they could have taken into overtime and at least get a point.
Mm-hmm.
But an errant pass from Eric Carlson looking for Malkin on the power play, and Mason McTavish, one of their young stars on Anaheim, was able to go down and score on a breakaway against Tristan Jarry, who has struggled mightily, over the past few games. Getting pulled against Ottawa, allowing 3 goals on 9 shots against Ottawa, and then this game, obviously losing late. They were up 3-2 in the third period, so definitely frustrating for the Pens. Mike Sullivan, I know has been very disappointed and been very, very, very vocal. I mean, saw interviews of Evgeny Malkin after the game. I mean, probably the most upset we've seen him in quite some time. They just know that they have the chance to be better, and they're not playing that way. So they get some probably well-needed rest for an older team to at least try to turn around this season early on, and the trajectory is on. And San Jose doesn't come it comes at the perfect time, rather. I mean, a team that's winless, this is the perfect opportunity for the Pens to at least get 2 points and move forward from this rather rude awakening to start the season.
Absolutely. Get on this West Coast swing on the right foot. We'll get you set up on the right foot when you go to Pure Hockey, our sponsor for our Penguins segment. That was so cheesy. Nate's laughing. That's when you know it's really cheesy. Pure Hockey, home of skates, sticks, protective gear, bags, jerseys, accessories, goalie equipment, and even NHL apparel. Go through the link in the bio and support the show and our friends at Stadium CNTV by going to Pure Hockey for all of your hockey needs. Once again, Pure Hockey, official sponsor of the Penguins segment each week here on Stranded in Pittsburgh. Thank you very much to them. And thank you to Nate for being here, because as someone who never played the game of hockey, there's some intricacies that I can't appreciate or touch on. I don't know why I'm acting like I'm speaking like a philosopher here, but I think it's a good question. You look at the box scores of some of these games, you watch some of these games, Penguins outshoot their opponents a lot, but it always seems like either the goalie's having the performance of a lifetime. We saw that one save in the Anaheim game that was out of this world. But the bulk of the question just boils down to what is happening where they're getting all these shots on net, but you don't think they're able to convert.
Well, I think it's funny you mentioned, the goaltending performance, especially for the Ducks. John Gibson played the first period and then he got hurt. And, I can't think of who replaced him. It was a backup goaltender nonetheless, right? I mean, it's a backup goalie and you can't score against him. I think right now what the Penguins, what's happening with them is they have so many stars, but not enough, like in hockey, the term grinders. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, to get to the front of the net and score. And the Penguins really have not had that since they've traded Patrick Hornqvist away. They have not had someone to be a net front presence and just bang home goals. I mean, maybe that's what you need from Jeff Carter, but Jeff Carter is this former superstar. I mean, he's still obviously playing, but like he's not a guy that's going to go park in front of the net and wreak havoc. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the Penguins get all these shots from the exterior from Carlson and Malkin and Sid, but no one's really going in and sacrificing their body like Patrick Hornquist or some of the other guys who used to be on the Pens used to do. And that's what the Penguins need to do. And I think the front office, I mean, if they're going to look to make any sort of changes, you need to find someone that can go and do that. Because obviously the guys they picked up in the offseason haven't done it so far. And those top two lines, even though they're the scoring line so far of the season, they don't have anybody on there that's going to, sacrifice themselves to get to the front of the net. Maybe Brian Russ, maybe Gensel, but like, I don't see it. I just don't think they're I don't know. I just don't think they're gritty enough compared to other teams to at least get in front of the net and score and screen the goaltender. So I think that's their issue. They're getting a lot of shots, but there's no one really putting them in the net.
Mm-hmm. Another big topic right now has been Tristan Jarry, who the Penguins signed to that big extension in the offseason. He, I think today, even in an interview or presser, said, I didn't play well against Anaheim. I need to be doing better. This has been a long running frustration for Penguins fans, I think, for some time now. What's the path to getting a better version of Tristan Jarry? And if we don't get that better version, what is there to do in your mind with such a big contract that goes on for as long as it does?
Well, I mean, obviously there's been a huge reliance on him to be the number one. I mean, at this point, I mean, I don't know what you can do to fix things, but I mean, think about how quickly the Pens moved on from Matt Murray after the two cups they won on. I mean, Murray struggled, and they were quickly pretty much done with him. His glove hand was really bad, and Tristan Jarry has just let in some weak goals, some stuff he should be stopping. And the Pens looked at him ever since he was drafted that he was going to be a top five type goaltender in the league, and we really have not seen it for the most part from him, and it's not helping through this start. With the Pens the way they're playing in front of him. Obviously, the Penguins aren't playing that great in front of him, but for him himself, he needs to be a little bit better. It stinks that Alex Nedeljkovic is hurt right now because I think you'd see more of him because he was once, at least splitting time in Carolina when he first came up. Hellberg, who came in and took the place of Jarry against the Senators. I mean, we're not going to see a whole lot of him just because he's a third stringer, but I mean, the Penguins need to see something from Jarry quickly or they're going to be in real trouble. So I don't know. There could be, I mean, and Jarry still, he's getting to that point where like it's now or never for him. So hopefully we
Right.
see sort of a turnaround in his game or else, I mean, he's going to be out the door.
Very fair. Very fair. What do you see the Penguins doing on this 3-game West swing? I have them winning the first two and then dropping one to the Kings at the very end there.
Yeah, I think they'll go 2-1. And the Kings are, I mean, they're a tough team to play against right now. I mean, they have a lot of young guys. I think hopefully the Pens can return the favor in Anaheim. I'm sure that one didn't sit well with the Pens, so I think they'll go into Anaheim and get a win. And obviously, I think it starts in San Jose. I mean, you have to beat the Sharks. You cannot let a team that's winless beat you. Or the fan base, not just like the team itself, but the fan base is really going to be, pretty upset and in turmoil if you lose a game to a winless Sharks team.
Yeah, I don't foresee things going too well if they lose that game. There's already people acting like the season's already a total loss, and you've seen it. I'm sure if you follow the
Oh
Penguins,
yeah,
you've seen it. So you don't need me to tell you whether you're Nate, who knows more than I do, or at home. But I couldn't fathom what a loss to the Sharks would look like on social and what people would be feeling, especially when those same people are chanting "Fire Canada" anywhere they go, whether it be Pittsburgh, PA, or Tokyo, Japan, or anywhere, Belarus, anywhere. They're chanting "Fire Canada" wherever they can go, so they can have another team suck. And I think if they lose to the Sharks, it might be fair to say that they suck. Just kidding. Maybe. But anyway, we also would like to extend our condolences to Adam Johnson's family after that terrible on ice incident that happened a few nights ago. Just a real tragedy. And, it was something shocking. I think we watch hockey a lot, and I don't think we ever think of how dangerous of a sport it is in terms of, a life could be lost in an instant when you're skating around on ice skates, obviously. And it's just a very unfortunate reminder that, the game's dangerous, but, you never consider the fact that it may be fatal. But when you're on skates that sharp, that's unfortunately a reality. And unfortunately, we were just reminded of that fact over the weekend.
Yeah, and you've already seen some changes in some of those leagues mandating neck guards. And I coach younger kids in ice hockey, and they all have to wear them. So, I mean, who knows, how far it goes in terms of what leagues extend that procedure. But yeah, it's a devastating loss and a very touching moment from the Penguins to honor him before that game against the Ducks. So, very unfortunate what happened to Adam Johnson.
Yeah, that was a very nice gesture, I think, to have everyone cheer for him rather than moment of silence. I think that was a nice little spin on things. I don't know if I've ever seen that before, but yeah, I think Penguins made both their minor league affiliates wear neck protection for the future. And then the WHL mandated neck protection, I believe, earlier today, actually. So I think there's some very necessary changes, and there's people that always are going to be like, this happens once in every how often, what's the need for it? Whether it happens one time a year, one time every 10 years, whatever the, ratio is, it shouldn't happen at all. People shouldn't die playing a sport. And I think any preventative measure you can take is necessary. So I'm all for them doing something like this to be proactive. And there's no good segue out of something like that, but we're running out of time here. So, Nate, any final thoughts to leave the people with before we enjoy, or I use that word very liberally, enjoy Thursday night football tomorrow or tonight, depending on when you're watching?
Yeah, I'm going to change things up, though, a little bit to the positive side of things in terms of football we may see this weekend. How about the WPIAL getting into their postseason action? I'll be at West Mifflin covering that game versus Mount Pleasant. So I'm excited to see all 6 brackets get underway and who comes out on top of each classification. It's going to be an exciting couple weeks here in Western PA high school football.
Yeah, there's a lot of good talent around here in Pittsburgh. I don't think that's something that flies under the radar too much, but I think it's something we don't appreciate so much being around here. A lot of really good powerhouses. I mean, you got people like Aaron Donald in the NFL that came from the area. You got guys like Phil Dracovic playing in college right now. Just a lot of good talent here. And it's fun to watch, and it's not something that should be taken for granted, I don't think. And I think sometimes we tend to do that. I really didn't have anything prepared for a final take. I know that's shocking coming from me, and you're probably expecting me to say psych and tell a really corny story. But unfortunately, I really don't have anything for you, Nate. I wish I did, other than we're going to be involved in a flag football game on Sunday since the Steelers play tomorrow. And if me and Nate end up on opposite teams, I'm not going to guard them the whole game because I've embarrassed myself enough. You've been here for the last half hour. You see how easily I do that. But I'll guard them once or twice, and we'll get those clips and put them all over the internet, and you can enjoy and laugh at my expense. But I've been working out pretty religiously for 3 weeks to a month now, and hopefully there's some quick turnaround on those results so I can keep up with them. But I remember when we played in college, he blew by everyone, so I'm not too confident in my abilities. But I'm gonna have to give it a go if we're not on the same team.
I'll say I'm the complete opposite. I've not worked out a day since maybe I've left college, so we'll see how it goes.
It's promising for me. It's promising then. Some people are naturally fast, though, and I'm not one of them.
I'm not. There's no way.
Hopefully, we're naturally fast to click off this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. Leave a like, leave a nice comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Even if you think we suck, we're trying our best, aka me. We'll talk to you later. See ya.